Thank you for an interactive morning of thought. We have another panel for you, but a different approach here, looking at industry perspectives. So I would like to have Dr. Bilal Hassan, a major organizer of the symposium, as well as our professor in food science, is going to lead this panel. Dr. Hassan, do you mind just introducing, no bios necessary, everybody can refer to the bios in the program book, but just introducing each person on your panel, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Hassan.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I appreciate it. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the industry panel discussion. I would like to start with introducing my guest, then give you an idea about the goal of this discussion. So I have with me Gabriela Saavedra, and she's from Thermo Fisher. She's an application specialist foods extrusion. She studied bioengineering at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, KIT. During her PhD studies, she specialized in food gels and emulsions with a focus on texture and rheology. She's now served as application specialist at Thermo Fisher Scientific, where she marries food extrusion, with rheology and other material characterization method. And she's from Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is the forefront innovation and building processing and analytical technologies, offering tools that enhance the quality of plant-based products. Welcome, Gabriela. And I have Stephen Lauro from Color Maker, and his bachelor, as I promised, I will not say the year because his bachelor before I was born. So he has a bachelor in biological science from UC Irvine, 1986, with the MBA from UC Irvine, and he has a Juris Doctorate from Southwestern University School of Law. He's very active practicing law until the year of 1999, where he started or founded the Color Maker in Anaheim, California. And he worked as a part-time in Cal Poly Pomona, so welcome back to CPP. He worked with his father, Dr. Gabriel Lauro, and Dr. Wayne Bedlock is our previous dean of College of Agriculture. And when he learned about natural color in 1999, he ended his legal career and working now as a full-time in Color Maker. And Color Makers is a pioneer of sustainable, natural color solutions that enables plant-based products to achieve appealing visual and meet consumers' needs. So welcome, Stephen, and welcome back to CPP. And we have Susie Ray, is a medical science liaison from Kate Farms. She is a registered dietitian with a master in human nutrition, and she has been working with Kate Farms for the last 5 years, and her area of interest include dietary fibers, probiotics, and food additives. Kate Farm is focused on developing organic, plant-based internal nutrition products and emphasizing high-quality, sustainably sourced ingredient for improved health outcomes. And welcome, Susie. Welcome, all my panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. And with no further delay, I would like to start with the first question, and that will be for Gabriela, for Thermo Fisher. And what are the key challenges in your industry that impact the growth and innovation of plant-based food products?
Thank you. That is a really interesting question. So from the technology perspective, I think plant-based products, they have a challenge to meet consumer demands. So we need to get a product that is appealing so consumers buy it again. For this, you need to not only have raw materials that are sustainable, but also the process design is really important. And process design without any analytical tools doesn't make sense, because you need to assess the properties that make your product appealing for the consumers, so you can turn back the curve and design your process in an efficient way. So that's why lab scale extruders and analytical tools are really important for product development. And also one of the challenges is how do I go from the lab to the pilot, and then from the pilot to the production scale. And this is a challenge that we are facing, everybody in the food industry. So we need to understand what are the key parameters or properties that we need in our product, so to keep them, achieve them by process design, and then translate them from the lab to the pilot to conserve the process design or to not waste that much material in empirical methods, but in a more mechanistic approach.
And just out of curiosity, because you have the material characterizations, and in my knowledge and a lot of the food scientists, this is a very difficult field which is not fully understood by food scientists. So I know a lot of resistance from the field. How do Thermo Fisher simplify or address those resistance from the consumer or the customers?
So I think the key message here is you need to understand what property or what your product needs to perform. So say texture. So you want to have certain bites that is not gummy like chewing gum, but it also has certain juiciness, and all of these are physical properties. So you understand what is behind the physics of the chewing behavior and the sensory perception, that you can not only rely on sensory panels, but also quantify in a more objective way what is the physical property that your materials need to have. I think this is what Thermo is trying to do, or what we are trying to do as application specialists, like teach our customers what we need to understand in a more objective way. So we rely on analytics to be more precise in our process development.
Well, thank you so much. I know this is out of the context question, but Thermo Fisher sent their whole team to support CPP since yesterday. So that's why I still need to know how you are simplifying those technologies, because they really provide a very sophisticated technologies. But there are ways they investing time on simplify it and make it more related to applications, that's the goal. It's not developing a technology that make it simple and applicable and friendly to the user. I have a question for Stephen, and that's more about the ingredient. So I don't know how color maker adapting to meet consumers' demand for transparency and sustainability and healthy ingredients in plant-based products, which is coming from the consumers or modern consumers' demand.
I think the first thing we should all realize is that colorants go everywhere. They're in plant-based foods, and they're in deep-fried chicken. So we don't limit ourselves at Color Maker to a particular category. We emphasize visual appeal. And one of the problems in the area of plant-based foods is that they often present a surface visual appearance as well as an interior appearance. And you need to start thinking about, as a formulator, how are you going to present your finished food or beverage product? We, as a company, make it a point to tell you where the colorant comes from, how it is extracted, where it's harvested, when it's grown. It is what it is, and beet juice is only going to go so far. There's unfortunately a misconception that natural colors are a one-for-one replacement for FD&C Red 40, and that is absolutely not the case. You will have to work hard to achieve the visual appearance, the hue or the shade of color that you hope to achieve using natural colors. So we like to tell formulators and students alike, think about your product, think about your process, and think about your package, because all three will impact how natural colors perform or don't in your finished food or beverage product.
Well, that takes me to another question, because you mentioned the consumers, and I felt like you criticizing the consumers, because I know consumers want something that appealing, looks good, and at the same time, it has to be natural and healthy. So it's the balancing between that. And we understand you cannot have a whole package. You need to have a partial solution. So how do you balance between that? And I don't want to name companies. I know in other countries, they use more natural colors, same products that have artificial colors in the US.
We try to help formulators think about the principal display panel, right? Every food has a PDP. Every food in this country has a nutritional panel, and every food has an ingredient deck. And so it's kind of a three-part balancing act. You want a clean ingredient deck, you want a strong nutritional panel, and you want a PDP that appeals to the consumer. So my favorite one is the principal display panel that says, just like grandma's, and then whatever the food may be. Well, grandma used a lot of butter. That's just the way it is. And that's going to impact the nutritional panel. And that in turn will impact your ingredient deck. So you want to try and find those ingredients that achieve the balance that the consumer will accept visually, right? If it looks good, we'll try it. If it tastes good, we'll try it again. So you want to appease the consumer visually in terms of flavor, in terms of nutrition. There are many consumers now who are buying products on the nutritional panel and not the fact that it's just like grandma's. Sorry, grandma. And there are other consumers who are truly looking exclusively at the ingredient deck. So you want to try and find that balance between all three so that your finished food or beverage product will be widely accepted in the marketplace.
Well, I hope my kids listen to you because they choose based on the appearance and the colors, and that's a big issue. Thank you so much, Stephen. And Susie, I know Kate Farms is doing great with the healthy products. So if you would like to share with us the Kate Farms approaches to address specific health needs for consumers through plant-based ingredient and products.
Yeah, so to answer this question, I can give you guys a short history lesson. Feel free to take a nap if you want to. Just kidding. It'll be short. So the origins of Kate Farms actually really began with a little girl named Kate. She was 5 years old, tube feeding dependent. She had cerebral palsy and really had a lot of issues with growing well. And so her parents were lucky enough to have the resources to formulate a new product that their child could actually tolerate and grow on. And so really, Kate Farms had been born from, intolerance, basically. And in this world, if you guys are clinicians or you have a family member, that's needed liquid nutrition, oral nutrition supplements, or even tube feeding, that's where you're gonna actually find Kate Farms. Most of the products that are currently available for this kind of population, the products have existed for many decades, and since the 70s haven't really even changed that much. And so that Kate Farms really started a little over 10 years ago. We entered the medical space in 2016, really looking at the needs of patients that had specific medical conditions or intolerances, sensitivities, or allergies. So Kate Farms products are free of the top 9 allergens. We know that allergies are increasing all over the world, and the end formulation for our products actually turned out to be plant-based, but wasn't necessarily the original goal. But Kate, or Katie, she actually was able to thrive. She was taken off hospice, and she did really well. But the products actually, met medical need for other patients, and so that's really where the business came from.
I think the same question for Stephen. How do you balance? Earlier we saw your presentation about processed food, and most of the ingredient itself has to be processed. So how do you balance between sourcing and ingredients that minimally processed, that you can use it and claim it is a healthy food? And do you do any biological or physiological properties or functions testing to select those ingredients?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question because technically Kate Farms products would fit in the ultra processed category by many definitions. At the same time, we do formulate them specifically for medical conditions, certain types of patients, but we also have to realize that the delivery is actually going to be really important. So for all of us in this room, we were able to eat lunch from the foods that were cooked by, these wonderful chefs. But for those that may have things like dysphagia, or perhaps they, are having nausea, vomiting, and many other things that can actually contribute to somebody not being able to really eat orally, we still have to get liquid nutrition through their tube, which actually requires a lot of different, physical chemical properties, all of these different things that really need to come together and be able to be delivered, in the medical space.
Thank you so much. And you mentioning coming together, and I think we put this panel representing a technology, an ingredient company, and RTE, or consumer products. So I would like to ask another question about how do you see, or what are the role of partnership and collaborations, and how do you see it driving the innovation with the plant-based industry? I would like to start with Stephen. How do you see that collaboration can drive the future of plant-based diet?
I think collaboration is the major trend going forward, as opposed to some of the minor trends. So our company is working very closely with several East Coast companies. We're working with several universities. So from academia to industry to larger industry, there's a tremendous need for the exchange of information, particularly technical information. So the use of natural colors is not as easy as one would hope. And so there's a lot of education, there's a lot of information that needs to be exchanged. The other thing you'll find about the modern industry is that a lot of processed food or ultra processed food is very technical. I try to tell students, in the kitchen you taste, right? In the plant you test, right? In the kitchen you have a recipe. In a plant you have a formula. And today's testing and today's formulas are very sophisticated. And so it takes a team effort in order to achieve that ultimate goal of a product that the consumer will accept, that can be scaled up, that can be distributed, and that can be shelf stable for a requested period of time. So I think collaboration is the major trend.
Thank you, Stephen. And I'll move to Susie. As RTE, how do you see the combining or collaborating with ingredient suppliers and technology and analytical systems can help you to produce better, healthier products?
Yeah, so collaboration is really, really important for the end product and for a number of reasons. So we know, of course, all of our consumers are getting smarter, especially when we look at, food product. So, science is really starting to, I think, come across most audiences, hopefully. And so we do a lot of partnerships in terms of research, academic, hospital institutions, things like that. Medical professionals generally want to see evidence-based medicine and recommendations, and so that's really important. But on the supply side of ingredients, we also need that collaboration as new ingredients, new things, new types of research are actually very important as, a company that produces, this type of product. It's just very important for us to see what we can do to advance health outcomes.
Thank you, Susie. And Gabriela, I know you are the technology, so you are like the first stone. I don't know how you see the work or the collaboration. Is it more on a long-term partnerships to achieve the final goals for the RTE producers going through the ingredient suppliers?
Definitely. So I'm just going to take example plant-based meat analogs, high moisture meat analogs. We know how to do them, but we don't understand them. So extrusion is a wonderful technology, but it's really challenging. It's a black box. There are very million of parameters that are interdependent, and when you change something, then everything changes, and that's only the process. Let's not talk about the ingredients. So alternative proteins are very different, but they all are supposed to fit in one box. But we cannot understand really what's happening inside of the extruder if we not collaborate with other people that are experts in their fields. So I personally like to partner with universities. So we are based in Germany, the material characterization side. So we have a lot of partnerships with universities across Europe. But this is only for the technology development. We also need to focus on how to get this to the market. So we have also partnerships with other technology companies, for example, big extruder manufacturers. I think Bühler is here as well. So we have an ongoing research cooperation to understand how to do scale-up, because scale-up sounds easy, but it's not at all easy, especially if we're talking about plant-based. So we understand what is happening in the small extruder that runs, I don't know, with 5 kilos per hour. Let's try to translate this to 1 ton per hour. It's not the same, the volume is not the same, the heat transfer is not the same. So without the cooperation, we're not going to be able to scale this process up into something that is really makes sense for the consumer's pocket. Because if we're not able to produce at a high quantity, it's going to be really expensive. People are not going to buy this, even if it's natural, clean label, and good for your health and the environment. It's too expensive.
Well said. And since we're talking about natural and healthy, I would like to go back to Susie, and if you would like to share with us the consumer demand and what are the biggest trends or innovation that you foresee to shaping the future of plant-based food and nutrition, and especially consumer resistant or consumers' demands? How do you imagine the future of plant-based diet?
So I'm hoping to see more adoption of plant-based ingredients, plant-based products just in general, with also looking at the sustainability aspect. But hoping also on the medical side of things, because that is our main focus there, that we're able to see new research, specifically looking at plant-based nutrition and certain disease states. So kidney disease, diabetes, looking at all of these different kinds of populations and how different plant-based ingredients can actually affect, these diseases is definitely something that, Kate Farms looks at in terms of innovating new product and really trying to help with those health outcomes, as we know that plant-based nutrition in general really does help with patient outcomes.
Thank you so much. And Gabriela, how do you see the technology will fit in there? I mean, do we see future like 3D printers, or, not every household can buy an extruder and do it themselves, but what are the technologies that will help to moving forward for the plant-based diet? And of course, to have the consumers on board.
3D printing is really interesting, but I think it's still in the early stages. So if we see the cost point of view, it's still too expensive. It's a niche product. So if we want to, as a technology company, enable these products more and to make them more affordable, we have to look at efficiency. So one way to improve efficiency is by obtaining data, analyzing it, and there's the buzzword, AI. So if we know what properties we get with certain process parameters, then we can cluster them and make everything more easy and more efficient. So we need these corporations to obtain big sets of data to be able to analyze it, run the algorithms, and just be more effective. Because in the end, everything that we do that takes a lot of time impacts the pockets of our consumers.
Thank you so much. And I'll move to Stephen. And back to the question, with all the consumers' demand and the future, how the future looks like, with the limitations of natural or minimally processed, and the consumer's demand, which is shifting toward healthier, but how we can cope up with that demand and, of course, keep it feasible.
My recommendation would be don't give up. Don't get tired. Don't get exhausted, because it is exhausting. It is a continuous educational process. I can't tell you how many people come to us asking for tomato red, and we gently push back, which tomato? Because so many consumers don't realize that there are a host of different colors of tomatoes. Years ago, must have been 10, 15 years ago, the trend was for soy-based hot dogs. And so we had a lot of projects in our lab, and we would gently push back, well, which hot dog? Because hot dogs come in 100 different colors. And it's that constant, repetitive, back and forth process. It can be exhausting, but don't give up. Continue to educate your customers, continue to educate consumers generally that there will be some variability in this food product because you're using natural ingredients. There will be some variability in its aroma, in its mouthfeel, in its flavor, in its visual appeal. If that's the future of the food industry, we can't be afraid of that. We can't be embarrassed. We're going up against 60 or 75 years of consistency is king. Right? Think about the growth of McDonald's. You could travel by car in 1950 from New York to LA, and every Big Mac along the way was exactly the same. And that was comforting. That was a wonderful experience, but times have changed, and we need to change with them. So as consumer demand grows, we've got to educate and then re-educate and then re-educate, because we're all learning what ketchup looks like when it's made with fresh tomatoes.
I love it. When you say educate, I'm a professor. That's pretty much how I make my living. So thank you so much for my guest. And I would like to open the floor for questions for the audience. So we will start to take any questions.
Hi there. So I have a very out there question. We're talking about the future. What is next? So I've been attending seminars, presentations, and I know that hybrids were in the US for a little bit, didn't do so well, hybrids being half meat, half vegetable. But now they might be coming back again. So I'm hearing that it's very hot in Europe, like in Lidl, they're selling more hybrids than they are actual meat or alternate protein. You know, that hybrids and alternate protein are actually in the meat case. So it's just another option there. So I'm thinking of what is the answer going forward? Do we kind of go back to hybrids? I mean, think about electric cars and how those have evolved. 20 years ago, you know, the hybrid was the start. I want to work on what's next. And I'm thinking, where do I invest my time for studies? And I'm thinking maybe hybrids is the key, that it's a learned behavior that over time, you know, 20 years of eating pea or soy or cashew in these formats will be normal. It won't be any buy-in. I'm looking for somebody to agree with me is what I'm looking for.
Well, I think the technology people can share with us their insight, because when it comes to hybrid, we are limited to the technology that we're using to produce it. So, Gabriela, could you please answer the question?
Yes and no. So there are hybrid products in Europe, yes. There are research groups that focus on this. For example, there is a research group in Germany at the University of Hohenheim, and they do German sausage that contain, I don't know, pumpkin seed protein. So it's the goal is to reduce the meat amount. So, because let's be real, not everybody is going to be a vegan. Nobody is going to be a vegetarian. So the goal is to reduce the amount of meat consumption in whatever way. So if you ask what is the next thing to do, I think you need to serve the variety of tastes. So one way in Europe or in Central Europe, where sausage is part of the daily meal, it makes sense to do hybrid products that taste like the winner and are basically hybrid products that have less amount of meat proteins. But if you are looking for other markets, then the taste changes. Then it doesn't make sense to have these products in these markets.
And that's the one thing that I have been hearing is protein diversity. So like alternate protein, we can't compete with meat. We want to just be another source. So I feel like if we could find a way to do that together, would be the way. So, but you're right, every market is going to be different. And I mean, Europe, but that's just it, as Germany was the biggest meat eaters, animal-based meat eaters, and now they're pretty much the biggest vegetarians in the market. No?
No.
I think you mean the Netherlands, not Germany.
Okay,
Yes.
maybe I didn't even, I could have sworn it was
I think
Germany.
Their languages is similar, but it's different countries. So.
It was like
So if you look at the statistic, I think the most plant-based products are produced in the Netherlands, then the UK, France, and then Germany. So, but there's still about 30% of the consumers, and in the ranges up to 30 years in Germany, 40% are flexitarians.
And Gabby's talking about Germany because she traveled from there. She's like been in plane for 14 hours. I can just add one thing to that. And when I came from Malaysia, I consider myself as the ambassador of Asia to the US. And the first question when I met my advisor, Job Jobing from University of Minnesota, like, why all the products is patties? What about the rest of the world? What about the culture? And I hope you are here tomorrow, my last presentation. We're going to talk about the next generation and how to be an inclusive program that tapping on other cultures where you can have people on board. Otherwise, they will not support the call. And I think, sorry, we had Darren before? Yes, and then we come back.
Yeah, I knew there was a.
You're right there.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's quick. Probably for Stephen, maybe. I'm wondering if there are any major consumer product brands who play in the licensing space who are working with your company to reverse engineer their flavor palettes for plant-based recipes.
Their color palettes, not their flavor palettes.
Okay.
So the future is CBD, just so you know. You're welcome. Yes, there are very large companies that are in our lab right now working to replace Red 3 for obvious reasons. I think it's important to remember that the visual appearance of your food or beverage product can deliver humor, can deliver fun, can deliver excitement. And many of the iconic brands, from M&M's to Reese's Cups to Hershey's Kisses, it's more than just the flavor and the aroma, it's also the visual cue, right? You see the shape of the Hershey's Kiss, and we all think, oh, that's delicious. And those companies don't want to lose that edge. They don't want to give up that competitive advantage. So they're working very hard on the visual appearance of their brands so that they can keep that special attribute using natural ingredients, and not just colors, but flavors and all the rest. A fun project that I believe I can share, because this was a good 10 years ago, the spice blend for El Pollo Loco was loaded with yellow 5 and yellow 6. And we helped them formulate those ingredients out. because they realized that a big part of your experience and my experience when we walk into that restaurant is seeing that yellow chicken grilling on the open fire. So companies are thinking along those lines, and they are trying to make that switch, but as I said earlier, it's not easy, and that's where CBD comes in. 'Cause you really have it. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Everybody wants to be natural, everybody wants to use upcycled ingredients, but
Yes.
they're more costly.
Yes.
And
Yes.
how does the government get involved with all of this? I mean, that's the bigger play here, like, who's gonna step in and change?
Well, and you raise a very good point, right? And we also all need to be conscious of that, because a plant-based product can be more expensive and therefore potentially not as widely accepted. But again, I would say to all of us, don't give up. Don't get tired. Don't get exhausted. Keep going.
And yeah, that's consumers' demand. Like everyone want to live in California, but buy a house in North Dakota. So, well,
Sorry, Stephen, I got 3 quick questions for you. One, you talked about the consistency, right? Like McDonald's across or Route 66 or whatever, right? But we see a company like Kellogg's that makes a cereal, sells it in the U.S., and it has the artificial colors, and they sell it in Europe market, it has natural coloring. What are your thoughts on that? Why would a company make the decision to not have the consistency from one country to another region of the world?
Excellent question, and I think someone earlier this morning brought it up. We learn color as children. We have a very successful customer who makes blue hot dogs. Because for 3-year-olds, blue is great, and hot dog is great. So why not? But somewhere around age 10, 11, 12, we come to associate savory flavors with red, not blue. So to get an adult to try a blue hot dog is going to take a lot of money.
Sure.
Right?
What are your thoughts on the fact that in the European Union, they don't have the same system in terms of generally regarded as safe as we have here in the United States? In the United States, essentially, companies are allowed to do whatever they want. But in Europe, there's more requirements in terms of testing and validation.
I think in addition to simple cost structures and the visual cue that consumers have grown up with in this country, right? You and I expect to see Fruit Loops very brightly colored. But Europe in many ways is ahead of us because their children, so many years ago, saw a more muted, a more pastel Fruit Loops. So those young people are now our age and they're quite comfortable. I remember hiring a woman out of Edinburgh, Scotland. This was probably 15 years ago. And her first comment to me was, well, I'm excited to work in a food company because it's the first thing I noticed when I came to America. Your food is so colorful compared to Scotland, right? Her experience as a little girl was a far more muted, more pastel grocery aisle than what we have here.
Well, what would you say to those who question the fact that how do you balance the excitement and the fun of the yellow and the blue or whatever, and the fact that there's so much literature and science out there that shows that this is when we talk about when we look at ADHD and ADD, ADHD, and other childhood symptoms. Where's the threshold in terms of we want to sell it for the excitement and the color, but we also want to be responsible in terms of, because I would imagine that Kate Foods doesn't use any artificial food coloring. So there's probably correlation here.
I would answer that twofold. One, are we reformulating an existing product or are we formulating a new product? I would say 15 years ago, the vast majority of work in our color lab was reformulating existing products to match red 40, to match yellow 5. Come forward 15 years and that project does not exist. We're now being asked, how can we make our product lemon yellow? banana peel yellow, curry yellow, mustard yellow. So I do think in the last 15 years, certainly with new product development, we've seen a tremendous switch not only away from what we call the gold standard. I mean, yellow 5 is the gold standard. If you want yellow, that's yellow. But we've come away from that visually, and now we're presenting to the consumer a shade of yellow that's quite different in my world, because that's what I do. I sell color. It's a very different shade of yellow, but it's acceptable. So I think we're moving there, but it's a slow process for all the reasons we've discussed: cost, ethnic, cultural, and just the time it takes to readjust what yellow looks like.
But didn't it have to be readjusted from a more natural to an artificial at some point?
Yes,
They
and
didn't start out.
yeah, no, they didn't. But we also didn't start out industrial, right? Most food in the 1800s and the early 1900s was made fresh. And then you're going to get a whole host of colors. It wasn't until we had our industrial revolution in the food industry that we began to standardize color, and nothing standardizes like the artificials. So if you want to look at that cycle, yes, we're definitely moving more towards natural color and away from a standard.
And that's the point of all the work that we're putting together and the collaboration, because there is no one step shifting, and that's it. It's a long term, and don't give up. So that was the key word. I have a room for one small question, if there's any one small question.
Actually have a question. So just piggybacking on that topic, the curiosity. So in other countries, is there less requirement for color standardization? Like, I mean, I know from, if I make a smoothie, fresh smoothie, and I let it oxidize, it turns brown, right? So, and I know we associate that as, ooh, yucky, right? But if I give it to my son, who's 2, he's gonna be like, yummy smoothie, it's brown. So are other countries okay with less standardization in color? Are you finding, so, okay, yeah. So that's where us on the, policy side and the nutrition and the grassroots side really probably need to shape a little bit more of our expectations and standards going forward. So you've given me a little marching order as a dietitian.
So, short answer.
Short answer, don't give up. Don't get exhausted, because you will. You will get exhausted. I'm warning you now. You'll get absolutely exhausted. It is an educational process. It takes time to readjust the consumer's expectations for the visual appearance of your food or beverage product. There's no shortcut. It takes time.
So we're reaching to the end of our session, but I would like to give you 1 minute for each panelist to have your closing remarks, and we'll start with Susie.
Keep going plant forward.
Have fun. Don't be embarrassed. Have fun. Own the technology. Own it. Many people are criticizing the food industry because we have such sophisticated equipment. Don't be embarrassed by that. I'm reminded of the television commercial where the chef in his hat and his coat is standing in front of the block of cheese, and he's cutting it one at a time. Doesn't that make you feel wonderful? Sargento, they're real cheese people. They make my sliced cheese one slice at a time. That's bullshit. Don't be embarrassed by the fact we use a machine to make those slices, right? Don't give up.
I would like all of you to collaborate with each other, because it's the only way forward. So as an equipment manufacturer, the technology is there, but without formulation side, without ingredient manufacturers, and without consumers, we cannot move something.
I can't agree anymore. And the key words actually that I heard today is education, adaptation, and that's pretty much what we are developing in Cal Poly Pomona in the nutrition and food science. For example, we started a plant-based minor, which is the only program offered in the country. And the focus with my colleagues, I don't want to call all their names, there's 13 of them, amazing team. And the message there, we educate, but we also work with early childhood and adaptation. And that's how we're going to build up a generation that knows the difference between what is real and what is not real, and they can make good decisions. And of course, end of the day, making decisions, selecting foods is back to the customers themselves. And this is their responsibility. We as a food industry, we know that is a profit industry. So the answer, whatever consumers want, the food industry will provide. So we should start with education, start with adaptation, and that's how we see a long-term change in the future. Well, thank you so much for my panelists. Big hand to them, and we really appreciate it. It was a very constructive conversation, and thank you so much for your participation. Looking forward to continue these conversations toward our goal of a healthier community. Thank you.